My wife texted, "I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Don't wait up." So I didn't. Instead, I had dinner with her sister, who showed me 6 months of messages between my wife and her coworker. Let me back up a second. My name is Silas Kelran, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. 42 years old, defense intelligence analyst for the past 15 years, married to Talia for 8, father to Emma who just turned 7. We live in a decent suburb outside Columbus, the kind of place where people mow their lawns on Saturdays and complain about property taxes at block parties. I should have known something was wrong when Talia started wearing perfume to work meetings. Not the vanilla stuff she'd worn since college, something expensive, something that said, "Notice me," in a language I didn't speak anymore. But hey, marriage makes you stupid sometimes. You explain away the obvious because the obvious hurts too much to acknowledge. The text came while I was debugging a network security protocol at my home office. Standard stuff. Someone always thinks they can outsmart encryption, and someone like me always proves them wrong. Talia's message felt routine, almost dismissive. Her sister Mira lived 20 minutes away, and the two of them had been doing these impromptu sister nights more frequently over the past few months. What wasn't routine was Mira calling me 30 minutes later. "Silas, are you free for dinner tonight? I need to talk to you about something important." Mira's voice carried that careful tone people use when they're about to ruin your evening. In my line of work, I've learned to recognize the sound of incoming bad news. It has a particular frequency, like a smoke detector with a low battery. "Sure," I said, because what else do you say? "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, and maybe an open mind." I drove to Mira's place through the kind of October evening that makes you remember why you moved to Ohio. The leaves were doing their annual show-off routine, and the air had that crisp bite that promises winter without threatening it yet. Mira lived in a renovated farmhouse that she'd bought after her divorce 2 years ago. A place with character, she called it, which was code for expensive repairs every 6 months. She met me at the door with an expression I'd never seen before. Mira was typically the cheerful sister, the one who remembered birthdays and organized family gatherings. Tonight, she looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret for too long. "Come in. I made chili." We ate in relative silence for the first 10 minutes. Mira's chili was always good. She had this way with spices that made simple ingredients taste complex. But tonight, the food felt like an obligation, something to do with our hands while we avoided the real conversation. Finally, she set down her spoon and looked directly at me. "Silas, I need to show you something, and I need you to know that I've been struggling with this decision for months." She pulled out her phone, opened the messaging app, and slid it across the table. These are screenshots of conversations between Talia and Aaron Price from her office. I've been covering for her, and I can't do it anymore. I stared at the phone like it might explode. In my professional life, I deal with classified information daily. I know how to compartmentalize, how to process intelligence without letting emotion cloud analysis. But this wasn't work. This was my wife's name at the top of a conversation thread that contained words like "miss you" and "when can we meet again." The first message was dated 6 months ago. 6 months of late meetings and client dinners and sister nights that apparently weren't sister nights at all. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Since the beginning. She asked me to be her alibi the first time, said it was just drinks with a coworker, that you were being paranoid about her work relationships. I thought it would be once, maybe twice, something she needed to get out of her system. I scrolled through the messages, noting timestamps against my mental calendar of Talia's absences. Every emergency at work was preceded by a message from Aaron. Every girls' night corresponded to their planned meetings. The operational security was amateur, but effective enough to fool a husband who wanted to trust his wife. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me tonight?" Mira's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her wine glass. "Because it's not stopping. Because she's talking about leaving you, but she wants to do it in a way that makes you look like the bad guy. And because..." She paused, took a breath. "Because she's been using my house as her cover story, and I can't be part of this anymore." The messages revealed more than just an affair. They showed planning, coordination, a systematic approach to deception that felt uncomfortably familiar. In my work, we call it operational tradecraft, the methods and practices used to conduct covert activities without detection. "There's something else," Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Aaron works for Meridian Defense Systems. He has security clearance." Now that got my attention. Meridian was a mid-tier defense contractor, the kind of company that handled sensitive but not classified projects. If Aaron had clearance, even low level, there were protocols about personal relationships that could compromise security. "What level?" I asked. I don't know the details, but Talia mentioned he travels to military installations for his job. I handed the phone back to Mira and leaned back in my chair. In the intelligence community, we have a saying: once is an incident, twice is a pattern, 3 times is enemy action. What I was looking at felt less like a marriage falling apart and more like a systematic compromise of my personal security. Mira, I need you to do something for me. Can you forward these screenshots to my secure email? Are you going to confront her? Not yet. First, I need to understand what I'm really dealing with. We finished dinner in contemplative silence. Mira walked me to the door, and for the first time in months, she looked relieved. Silas, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. You told me when it mattered. That's what counts. I drove home through the same beautiful October evening, but the scenery looked different now. Everything looked different now. The house I'd lived in for 5 years felt like a crime scene I hadn't discovered yet. Talia's car wasn't in the driveway, which was expected. According to her text, she was staying at Mira's tonight, except now I knew she wasn't. I went straight to my home office and opened my secure laptop. Time to find out exactly what Aaron Price did for Meridian Defense Systems, and whether my marriage was just collateral damage in something bigger. The thing about intelligence work is that it teaches you patience. You learn to gather information systematically, to build a complete picture before taking action. Emotion makes you sloppy, and sloppy gets people hurt, so I started with the basics. Aaron Price, age 36, systems analyst for Meridian Defense Systems, divorced, 1 child, lives in a downtown Columbus apartment that costs more than my mortgage. His LinkedIn profile was professionally bland, the kind of careful neutrality that suggests someone who understands information security. But LinkedIn was just the surface. I had access to databases that most people don't know exist, courtesy of my security clearance and 15 years of building professional relationships in the intelligence community. Within an hour, I had Aaron's employment history, his financial profile, and his security clearance level. Secret clearance granted 3 years ago. Not the highest level, but sufficient for access to sensitive military procurement information, the kind of information that foreign intelligence services find very interesting. I leaned back in my chair and considered the implications. In my experience, there are no coincidences in the intelligence world. When someone with security clearance starts a relationship with the spouse of an intelligence analyst, you have to assume the worst until proven otherwise. My phone buzzed. A text from Talia. Having a great time with Mira. Probably won't be home until late tomorrow. Love you. The casual dishonesty was almost insulting. I'd spent years analyzing deception patterns in foreign communications, and my wife was lying to me with all the sophistication of a teenager sneaking out past curfew. I opened the screenshots Mira had sent and began a detailed analysis. The messages revealed a pattern that went beyond simple infidelity. Aaron was asking questions about my work, about my travel schedule, about my home office setup. Casual questions, the kind a concerned boyfriend might ask about his girlfriend's husband, except they weren't casual. They were intelligence gathering. In one exchange from 3 weeks ago, Talia had mentioned that I was working on a new network security protocol for military communications. Aaron's response was enthusiastic, asking for details about the timeline and implementation. Talia, apparently flattered by his interest in her husband's work, had provided more information than she should have, information that was supposed to be classified. I spent the next 2 hours documenting everything, building a timeline that correlated Aaron's questions with my project milestones. The pattern was clear. Aaron Price wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was using that affair to gather intelligence about my work. The question was whether he was freelancing or working for someone else. I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. Kellerman. Rick, it's Silas Kelran. I need a favor. Rick Kellerman was my former handler at NSA, now working private sector security consulting. We'd maintained a professional relationship after I transitioned to my current position, the kind of relationship that comes in handy when you need information quickly and quietly. Silas, it's been a while. What do you need? Background check on someone. Meridian Defense Systems employee named Aaron Price. I need to know if he's been in contact with any foreign nationals, if he's had any unusual financial activity, if he's been flagged for anything. Official or unofficial? Personal, but urgent. Rick was quiet for a moment. In our business, personal requests for background checks usually mean someone's marriage is in trouble, or someone's worried about their kids, or someone's discovered their spouse is compromising national security. I'll make some calls. Give me 12 hours. Thanks, Rick. I owe you. You owe me dinner and an explanation, but we'll settle the debt later. I hung up and looked around my home office. Suddenly, everything felt contaminated. My computers, my files, my workspace. How much had Aaron learned through Talia? How much classified information had been compromised through pillow talk and casual conversation? I spent the next hour conducting a security sweep of my home network. What I found made my stomach clench. Someone had installed monitoring software on our home router. Professional-grade stuff, the kind that captures all network traffic and stores it for later analysis. The installation date was 5 months ago, shortly after Talia and Aaron's affair began. My home network had been compromised. Every email, every file transfer, every piece of work I'd done from home over the past 5 months had been monitored and recorded. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was espionage. I documented the intrusion, captured the malware signatures, and began the process of cleaning my network. But the damage was done. Months of classified communications had been intercepted, analyzed, and presumably passed along to whoever Aaron was really working for. My phone rang. Talia. Hi, honey. Just wanted to check in. Mira and I are having such a good time. We're thinking about driving to Cleveland tomorrow, maybe doing some shopping. That sounds nice, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Take your time. You're not upset? I know I've been away a lot lately. I'm fine, Talia. Enjoy yourself. After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office and tried to process what I'd learned. My wife was having an affair with a foreign intelligence asset. My home had been under surveillance for months. My work had been compromised, possibly endangering national security, and tomorrow, Talia would come home expecting everything to be normal. I looked at my watch. 11:30. In 8 hours, my wife would discover that her key no longer worked and that her sister was standing in my kitchen making breakfast. But first, I had some preparations to make. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent the hours until dawn implementing what we call defensive countermeasures in the intelligence community. In civilian terms, I was covering my backside and preparing for war. First, I changed every password, every security code, every access credential in our shared digital life, bank accounts, credit cards, streaming services, cloud storage, everything. I documented each change with timestamps and screenshots, building a paper trail that would hold up in court. Next, I contacted my attorney. Janet Velasquez was a family law specialist who'd handled Mira's divorce 2 years ago. She was known for being thorough, aggressive, and expensive. At 5 a.m, I left her a voicemail requesting an emergency consultation. Then I called a locksmith. Emergency service rates are painful, but necessary. By 7 a.m., every lock in the house would be changed. The most difficult task was securing my work materials. I spent 2 hours encrypting files, moving sensitive documents to secure storage, and implementing additional security protocols on my home office. If Aaron had been monitoring my network, he was about to find himself locked out. At 6:30, my secure phone rang. Rick Kellerman. Silas, we need to talk. In person. Now. What did you find? Not over the phone? Meet me at the usual place in 30 minutes? The usual place was a diner near the airport that served terrible coffee and minded their own business. Rick was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a view of the parking lot. Old habits. Your boy Aaron is interesting, Rick said without preamble. 3 months ago, he made a cash deposit of $15,000. 2 weeks later, another $10,000. The deposits correspond with unusual activity on his communications. Encrypted messaging apps, VPN usage, contact with known foreign intelligence operatives. Which operatives? Chinese, MSS probably. The kind of people who specialize in economic espionage and technology transfer. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The Ministry of State Security was China's primary intelligence agency, and they were very good at what they did. If Aaron was working for them, this was bigger than a simple affair. There's more, Rick continued. Aaron's ex-wife filed a police report 6 months ago claiming he'd hacked her computer and stolen financial information. The case was dropped when she suddenly withdrew her complaint. 3 guesses who paid off her credit card debt the following week. How deep is this? Deep enough that I've already contacted the FBI Counterintelligence Division. They're going to want to talk to you today? I nodded. I'd expected this. Once foreign intelligence enters the picture, everything becomes a federal matter. Rick, I need a favor. My wife doesn't know that I know about any of this yet. I need a few hours to secure my personal situation before this becomes an official investigation. How long? Give me until noon. Then I'll cooperate fully with whatever the Bureau needs. Rick checked his watch. You've got 4 hours, Silas. Don't do anything that compromises the investigation. Understood. I drove home through morning traffic, my mind racing through contingency plans. In 4 hours, my house would be swarming with federal agents. Before that happened, I needed to have a very difficult conversation with my wife. The locksmith was just finishing when I pulled into my driveway. New deadbolts, new door handles, new security system codes. I paid him in cash and tested each lock twice. At 8:15, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched Talia get out of an Uber, looking relaxed and happy. She was wearing the expensive perfume and a dress I didn't recognize. She tried her key in the front door. When it didn't work, she tried again, then knocked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I went to the kitchen and started making coffee. The knocking became more insistent. "Silas, my key isn't working. Can you let me in?" I opened the door to find my wife looking confused and slightly irritated. "The locks were acting up," I said. "I had them replaced this morning." "Without telling me?" "It was an emergency service call. Come in." Talia stepped into her own house like a guest, looking around suspiciously. The familiar had become foreign, and she could sense it even if she couldn't identify why. "Something smells good," she said, following me to the kitchen. "Mira's making breakfast," I replied. Talia stopped walking. "What?" Mira looked up from the stove, where she was scrambling eggs with the kind of careful attention that suggested nervous energy. She'd arrived 20 minutes ago, as we'd planned. "Hello, Talia." "Mira? What are you doing here? I thought you were still sleeping when I left this morning." "I wasn't there this morning," Mira said quietly. "I was here, talking to Silas." Talia looked between us, her confusion shifting into something that might have been fear. "I don't understand." I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. "Sit down, Talia. We need to talk." "About what?" "About Aaron Price. About the past 6 months. About the fact that you haven't been staying at your sister's house when you said you were." The color drained from Talia's face. She looked at Mira, who was carefully not making eye contact. "You told him," Talia said. "I had to," Mira replied. "This has gone too far." Talia sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Silas, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But first, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about infidelity anymore. Aaron Price is under federal investigation for espionage. Our house has been under surveillance. My work has been compromised. What started as an affair has become a national security issue." "That's impossible. Aaron's just a Chinese intelligence asset who's been using your relationship to gather classified information about my work. The FBI will be here in 3 hours to begin their investigation." Talia stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "You're being paranoid. Aaron deposited $25,000 in cash over the past 3 months. He's been in contact with known foreign operatives. He installed monitoring software on our home network. This isn't paranoia, Talia. This is espionage." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of eggs cooking. Mira turned off the burner and served breakfast that none of us would eat. "What happens now?" Talia asked, her voice barely audible. "Now you have a choice," I said. "You can cooperate with the federal investigation, provide information about Aaron's activities, and hope for the best. Or you can continue lying, obstruct justice, and spend the next decade in federal prison." "And us?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in months. The woman I'd married 8 years ago was still there, somewhere underneath the deception and betrayal. But she was buried so deep I wasn't sure she could find her way back. "There is no us, Talia. That ended 6 months ago when you chose Aaron over our marriage. The only question now is whether you're going to make this easy or difficult." The FBI arrived at exactly noon, just as Rick had promised. 3 agents in unremarkable cars, dressed like insurance salesmen, carrying briefcases that probably contained enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small city. Special Agent Sarah Morrison was the lead investigator, a woman in her 40s with the kind of professional demeanor that suggested she'd spent years dealing with people who thought they were smarter than they actually were. Her partners, Agents Chen and Rodriguez, set up monitoring equipment while Morrison interviewed each of us separately. Talia went first. She spent 2 hours in my home office with Morrison, and when she emerged, she looked like someone who just discovered that her entire reality was a carefully constructed illusion. "Mrs. Kelran has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation," Morrison told me. "She'll be participating in a controlled communication operation with Mr. Price." "Controlled communication?" "She's going to continue her relationship with him, under our supervision. Every conversation will be monitored. Every meeting will be surveilled. We need to understand the full scope of his intelligence-gathering operation." Mira was next. Her interview was shorter. She was a witness, not a participant, but she'd agreed to let the FBI use her house as a staging area for their surveillance operation. My interview lasted 4 hours. Morrison wanted to know everything: what projects I'd worked on, what information Aaron might have accessed, what damage control measures needed to be implemented. By the time we finished, I felt like I'd been through a professional debriefing. "Mr. Kelran, I need to be clear about something," Morrison said as we concluded. "Your marriage is now part of an active federal investigation. Any decisions you make about divorce, separation, or custody arrangements need to be coordinated with our office." "For how long?" "Until we've neutralized the threat and prosecuted everyone involved. Could be months, could be years." That evening, after the FBI had left and Mira had gone home, Talia and I sat in our living room like strangers waiting for a bus. "I never meant for this to happen," she said. "Which part? The affair or the espionage?" "I didn't know about the espionage. I thought Aaron was just interested in your work. He asked questions, but I thought he was trying to understand my life better." "Talia, he was pumping you for classified information. Every question he asked, every detail you shared. It was all intelligence gathering." "I know that now, but at the time it felt like someone was finally paying attention to me." I looked at my wife and tried to remember when we'd stopped paying attention to each other. Marriage is like a garden. Ignore it long enough, and weeds start growing in the spaces where flowers used to be. "What happens to Emma?" Talia asked. "Our daughter was spending the week with my parents, a planned visit that had suddenly become a blessing. Emma didn't need to see her parents' marriage disintegrating in real time." "Emma stays with my parents until this is resolved. The FBI doesn't want her anywhere near this situation." "And us?" "There is no us, Talia. There's a federal investigation, and there's two people who used to be married trying to minimize the damage to their daughter." Talia started crying then, the kind of quiet tears that suggest someone has finally understood the magnitude of their mistakes. "I'm sorry, Silas. I'm so sorry." "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this." The next morning, Agent Morrison called with an update. Aaron had been arrested during a routine traffic stop, a pretext that allowed the FBI to search his apartment and seize his electronic devices. "We found everything," Morrison told me. "Encrypted communications with Chinese handlers, classified documents stolen from your home network, evidence of financial payments from foreign sources. Mr. Price is looking at 20 years in federal prison." "What about Talia?" "Your wife's cooperation has been valuable. She'll face some consequences, but nothing like what Mr. Price is facing. Probably community service, probation, security clearance revoked if she ever had one." "And the investigation?" "Ongoing. Mr. Price was part of a larger network. We're rolling up his contacts, tracing the money, identifying other compromised individuals. This could take months to fully resolve." I hung up the phone and looked around my house. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The home I'd lived in for 5 years had become a crime scene, a federal case study, a cautionary tale about the intersection of marriage and national security. Talia emerged from the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping since the FBI interview. She looked exhausted, older, like someone who'd aged years in a matter of days. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness is a complicated concept when national security is involved. Personal betrayal is one thing, espionage is something else entirely. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know I'll never be able to trust you again, and without trust, forgiveness doesn't matter." Talia nodded like she'd expected that answer. "I'm going to stay with my mother for a while. Give you some space, let the FBI do their work without having to coordinate around our situation. That's probably best. Silas, for what it's worth, I never stopped loving you. I just lost my way." "I know, but love isn't enough sometimes. Sometimes the damage is too extensive to repair." She packed a bag and left that afternoon. I watched her car disappear down the street and felt something that wasn't quite relief, but wasn't sadness either. It was the feeling you get when a long-term problem finally resolves itself, even if the resolution isn't what you'd hoped for. That evening, I called my parents to check on Emma. "Daddy, when are you and Mommy coming to get me?" "Soon, sweetheart. We're just dealing with some grown-up stuff right now." "Are you getting divorced like Uncle Mike and Aunt Lisa?" Kids are more perceptive than adults give them credit for. Emma had sensed the tension even before I'd understood its source. "We're working through some problems, Emma. But whatever happens between Mommy and me, we both love you very much." "I know, Daddy. Can I stay with Grandma and Grandpa a little longer? They let me stay up late and eat ice cream for breakfast." "A little longer, sweetheart. I'll see you soon." After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to plan for a future I couldn't quite envision. The FBI investigation would continue for months. My marriage was over. My daughter was safe but confused. My career would survive, but with additional security protocols and oversight. In intelligence work, we have a concept called acceptable losses. the damage you're willing to sustain to achieve a larger objective. I'd never thought of my personal life in those terms before, but sometimes acceptable losses are the only kind of victory you get. 3 months later, the federal case against Aaron Price concluded with a guilty plea and a 20-year sentence. The Chinese intelligence network he'd been part of was dismantled, with 7 arrests and multiple deportations. The FBI's investigation revealed that Aaron had been targeting defense contractors and government employees across 3 states, using romantic relationships as cover for intelligence-gathering operations. Talia's role in the affair earned her 2 years of probation, community service, and a permanent flag on her security record that would prevent her from ever working for the government or holding a clearance. She'd moved back in with her mother and was seeing a therapist twice a week. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. When national security is involved, family courts tend to defer to federal recommendations. I retained primary custody of Emma, the house, and most of our shared assets. Talia got visitation rights, her car, and the knowledge that she'd narrowly avoided federal prison. "The whole thing feels surreal," Mira said over dinner at her house, "like something that happens to other people." "In our business, we say that operational security failures always feel impossible until they happen," I replied. "Then they feel inevitable." Emma was adapting better than I'd expected. Kids are resilient, and she'd accepted the new normal with the kind of flexibility that adults struggle to manage. She spent weekdays with me and weekends with Talia, an arrangement that provided structure without forcing her to choose sides. "Daddy, why did Mommy's friend want to know about your work?" she'd asked one evening while I was helping with homework. "Some people try to learn things they're not supposed to know, sweetheart. Mommy's friend was one of those people." "Like cheating on a test?" "Something like that." Agent Morrison had kept me updated throughout the investigation, partly as a professional courtesy and partly because my testimony would be crucial if the case went to trial. Aaron's guilty plea had eliminated that necessity, but the broader implications of his operation were still being assessed. "Your home network was more valuable than we initially realized," Morrison told me during our final debriefing. "The information Mr. Price gathered provided his handlers with detailed intelligence about military communication protocols, defense contractor capabilities, and government personnel security practices. The damage assessment is still ongoing." "How much of it was my fault?" "None of it was your fault, Mr. Kelran. You were targeted by a sophisticated operation that exploited your personal relationships. The failure was systemic, not individual." That was professionally reassuring, but personally insufficient. I'd spent months analyzing my own security practices, identifying the vulnerabilities that had made the operation possible. The conclusion was uncomfortable. Perfect operational security is incompatible with normal human relationships. "The real question," Morrison continued, "is whether you're interested in consulting work. The Bureau is developing new training protocols for personnel security, based on lessons learned from this case. Your perspective would be valuable." I considered the offer. Consulting work would provide additional income and professional development opportunities. It would also mean spending more time thinking about the intersection of personal and professional security, which might not be healthy for someone trying to rebuild his life. "Let me think about it," I said. That evening, I picked up Emma from school and drove to the park where we'd spent countless Saturday afternoons before everything changed. She was excited about her science project, a volcano that would erupt with baking soda and vinegar during next week's presentation. "Will Mommy be there?" she asked. "If you want her to be." "I want both of you to be there, but not sitting together. That makes things weird." "We can arrange that." Emma's volcano erupted perfectly during the science fair, covering her display table with foam and earning enthusiastic applause from parents and teachers. Talia and I sat on opposite sides of the classroom, proud of our daughter and carefully polite to each other. Afterward, the 3 of us went for ice cream, maintaining the kind of civilized distance that divorced parents learn to navigate. Emma chattered about school, friends, and her plans for summer vacation, while Talia and I made appropriate parental responses and avoided eye contact. "She seems happy," Talia said as we walked back to our cars. "Kids adapt. It's what they do." "Silas, I know this doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I'm grateful for how you've handled this, for protecting Emma, for not making things worse than they had to be." "We both made choices, Talia. Mine just happened to be better for our daughter." Do you think she'll be okay, long term?" I looked at Emma, who was skipping ahead of us, humming a song from her favorite movie. She looked like a normal 7-year-old girl whose biggest concern was whether she'd get to stay up late on Friday night. "She'll be fine. Kids are tougher than we think." "And you?" "I'll be fine too. Different, but fine." That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat in my home office and reviewed the consulting proposal from the FBI. The work would be interesting, professionally rewarding, and personally challenging. It would also mean regular travel, which would complicate custody arrangements. But it would also mean moving forward, building something new from the wreckage of what I'd lost. I opened my laptop and began drafting my acceptance letter. 6 months later, I was presenting security training to government personnel across the country, teaching people how to recognize and respond to the kind of operation that had destroyed my marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become an expert in preventing the exact type of personal security failure I'd experienced. Emma was thriving in her new routine. She'd made new friends at school, joined the soccer team, and developed an interest in astronomy that required regular trips to the science museum. Talia had moved into her own apartment and was working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit organization, a job that didn't require security clearance or government interaction. "Do you miss being married?" Emma asked one evening while we were looking at stars through her new telescope. "I miss some things about being married, but I like our life now too." "Do you think you'll get married again?" "Maybe someday. Would that bother you?" "Only if she doesn't like science, or if she's mean to you. Those are good criteria." Emma adjusted the telescope focus and pointed it toward Jupiter. "Daddy, do you think there are people on other planets who have to worry about spies and bad guys?" "I think people everywhere have to worry about protecting the things that matter to them. Like family? Especially like family." We spent the rest of the evening mapping constellations and talking about the possibility of life on distant worlds. It occurred to me that this was the kind of conversation I'd never had when I was married, when my time was divided between work stress and marital tension. Sometimes acceptable losses create space for unexpected gains. The next morning, I received a call from Agent Morrison. The Chinese intelligence network that Aaron had been part of was attempting to reconstitute itself, recruiting new assets and targeting new victims. The FBI wanted to expand the security training program, and they needed experienced instructors. "It's a 3-year commitment," Morrison explained. "Significant travel, but excellent compensation, and you'd be preventing other families from going through what you experienced. I'll need to discuss it with Emma." "Of course. Take your time." That evening, I explained the opportunity to Emma over dinner. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions about travel schedules and custody arrangements, and then rendered her verdict with the kind of clarity that only children possess. "If it helps other kids not have their families broken by bad guys, then you should do it. Even if it means I'll travel more? Daddy, you're helping people. That's more important than anything else." I accepted the position the next day. 2 years later, I was the senior instructor for the FBI's Personnel Security Training Program, teaching hundreds of government employees and contractors how to recognize and respond to foreign intelligence operations targeting their personal relationships. Emma was 9 years old, fluent in 3 programming languages, and planning to study astrophysics at MIT. Talia had remarried, an accountant named David who coached youth soccer and made her laugh. She seemed genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known her, and our co-parenting relationship had evolved into something approaching friendship. "I saw your interview in Security Management magazine," she mentioned during one of Emma's weekend transitions. "You're becoming famous. Notorious, maybe. Famous is different. Emma's proud of you. She tells everyone at school that her father catches spies." "I teach people how to catch spies. It's different?" "Not to a 9-year-old. That evening, Emma and I were working on her science fair project, a demonstration of satellite communication principles that would probably win first place and definitely confuse most of the parents. "Daddy, do you think Mommy's friend Aaron ever thinks about what he did to our family?" It was the first time she'd mentioned Aaron in over a year. I'd wondered when this conversation would happen. I think people who make bad choices spend a lot of time thinking about those choices. "Do you think he's sorry?" "I think he's sorry he got caught. Whether he's sorry about hurting people is harder to know." "I'm glad you caught him." "I didn't catch him, sweetheart. I just helped other people understand what he was doing." Same thing. Emma returned to her project, carefully adjusting the antenna array she'd built from spare electronics and determination. She was right, in the way that children are often right about things adults complicate. I had caught Aaron Price, in the sense that mattered most. I'd protected my family, preserved my daughter's future, and built something meaningful from the wreckage of betrayal. Sometimes that's the only kind of victory that matters. The next morning, I received an email from a colleague at the Defense Intelligence Agency. They were developing a new counterintelligence training program and needed someone with operational experience and teaching credentials. I looked at the offer, then at Emma, who was reading a book about black holes while eating cereal. "Emma, how do you feel about moving to Washington?" She looked up from her book, considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, and smiled. Will there be better telescopes? The best telescopes in the country. Then let's go catch more bad guys, Daddy. We moved to Washington 6 months later, into a house with a view of the Potomac and a backyard perfect for stargazing. Emma enrolled in a gifted program that challenged her intellectually, and I began teaching the next generation of intelligence professionals how to protect themselves and their families from the kind of operation that had once destroyed mine. 5 years after my wife texted that she was staying at her sister's house, I was one of the country's leading experts on personal security and counterintelligence. Emma was 14, fluent in 4 programming languages, and planning to study quantum physics at MIT. And every night, when I tucked her into bed, I remembered that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you becomes the foundation for the best thing that can happen to your child. That's not revenge, that's victory.